Hey guys, it's Abby and welcome back to my channel. So for today's video, we're going to be talking about pricing your work. So lately, I've been seeing a lot of tweets about this whole topic of how to price your work, and I saw one that directly was targeted to me because I'm a lettering artist, and someone said that you have to price it like around $50, and that's around 2,000 pesos. And personally, I was attacked because everyone else, like the illustration, logo, branding, it all exceeded $100 or 5,000 pesos. And personally, that's not the case, and I really just wanted to clear it out. I really also wanted to talk about it in this video because I realized I never have been upfront about talking about artist rates, but ideally this is something that should be very much open to be discussed here in this online space, because the whole concept of artists earning money at this age is already very rampant. And personally, during my time when I started, it was really hard to get it off, but now it's easier, and we really have to discuss these things because there are now a lot of artists coming out in the scene, and it's really important to bring up these ideas so that everyone is aware of how to price their work. So today I'm partnering with Skillshare for this topic. Skillshare is an online learning community with over 25,000 classes on creativity, business, design, and more. Learning is such an easy way to gain knowledge and also gain insight about things that you are interested in, and Skillshare has a lot of classes targeted to very specific types of learning. Personally, I found the freelance classes to be really helpful. I will also share some of my favorites when you watch the end of this video, so keep watching to learn more about that. And also, to add to that, Skillshare has really been an accessible way for me personally to learn a lot of things. Coming from a background of advertising, I really had not much knowledge when it came to making art, doing the processes, and really honing my work. And freelance, this topic is very much generic, and there's not a specific platform that can actually give you advice other than Skillshare, because Skillshare has teachers that really talk about these experiences because they have experienced them themselves, and it's really helpful to pick up ideas from these experienced and seasoned individuals in order for you to better improve on your work and be more knowledgeable about things that you have to be good at. So keep watching this video to learn more about how to price your work. So to start, let me give you a background of my career so far. I worked as a freelance designer and artist for maybe 3 to 4 years. I still do freelance now, but I toned it down to just 1 or 2 projects per year. I also write books, so that means I'm a book author. And lastly, I also run a shop, which means I manage my shop operations and make sales out of the stuff that I sell. But for this video, we're just gonna be talking solely for the freelance and book sales, because I will give you the whole distinction between these two income streams, and it's really important to be knowledgeable about all these things, because if you're pursuing a different type of art, different type of career in terms of art, there are a lot of ways you can earn, and not just by doing freelance or doing books. You can do both, and then you have to be specific in the type of deliverables that you actually make. For example, when you do freelance, it can mean working for a company. Like for me, I've worked with ad agencies in order to come up with products. Like I've seen my work on flip-flops, iced tea bottles, bags, and you can also do personal freelance work, which means you do clients for weddings, you do wedding invitations, personal commissions, and this is another tier of products that you actually make. And then freelance can also mean design work that's needed for posters, graphic design, and basically collaterals for a specific event, specific campaign, or things that are actually relevant to your client. Ultimately, your goal is to earn the money you deserve and earn it for the skills that you have delivered to your client or whoever is requiring the work that you have to do. So let's talk about the factors that determine on how you price your work. First off is the budget. The budget can mean the budget of the client, the budget of your business, or the budget of your book publisher. Overall, before you start asking questions, I always ask the client what their budget is, because this helps me get an idea on how to get my artist rate from that, and at the same time see how important this project is, because the more budget people put into it, the more important and prioritized it is in the business. And that's something you have to remember, because if you want to work on something and earn a lot of money from it, you have to consider the budget in order for your goal to be achieved. The second factor is your skill. So your skill is something that you have to be learning over time. Also, Skillshare is a great idea for that, so you can improve further on your skills. So skills can mean design work, writing work, copy work, your proficiency with certain softwares like Photoshop, InDesign, editing videos, Final Cut, iMovie, Adobe Premiere Pro. All of these are actually lots of skills that you need to be able to know, especially if you're required to do a certain type of work that will require these types of softwares. The third one is labor. So labor is really important in terms of the amount of work that you're going to be putting in for the project. For example, if a freelance client asks you to do a poster with graphics on it, you have to be particular with what types of graphics are needed, because if they tell you, oh, we also want you to do an Instagram size, we also want you to do a banner size, or for tarpaulin, and for digital, for Facebook ads, for Instagram ads, you have to be particular with these because the amount of work you have to put into it is very particular in terms of the sizing, resizing elements, fixing everything to make sure it's compatible with all softwares and all devices and all platforms. The next one is, of course, experience. The longer you are in this industry, the higher your rates will be. I remember starting out, my wedding invitation, or was that like an 18th birthday invitation, was actually just 500 pesos, which is just like $10, and it was a relatively simple task. But you have to take note, that was around 2013, 6 years ago. I was 20 years old. I was barely doing this as a business, so all of these didn't factor into my expenses. But now I've been in this business for quite a long time. My rates have gone higher, my reach has gone higher, my experience with certain things has also become better. I am more professional now, and my following also on social media has also increased, and I think these all play in, especially when it comes to books. Publishers are very particular with your follower count if you have a good community, because this helps them bring the book out to the public. I can't tell you how I price my work because it's sort of based on my view, on my experience, but I would say that now I don't just accept really low rates. I also base it on the client, but I always start minimum $100 and up, depending on the type of work that is to be done. This is also something worth noting because I also do a lot of Instagram posts, and these are also paid work. So sometimes when I do freelance work, I also add in like, oh, I can post this on Instagram, I can share it on YouTube and talk about the product because I designed them. So it's something that you can also add to the mix, but make sure all of these sort of get in the picture so that you can further get an idea on how to price your work. The most important factor for me, apart from experience, I think they're both on the same weight, would be materials. Materials are not that cheap. I remember getting my first watercolor set was really expensive. It's probably like $60, and I just got out of college and I was like, how am I gonna spend all this money for just a set of watercolors? And then you're gonna have to buy paper. I did a lot of freelance work before that also required a lot of drawings and illustrations because I didn't have my iPad back then, so everything was scanned. So I had to get a scanner, I had to get a good camera, I had to get a good laptop. I also had to get a lot of tools that were very much professional in terms of how I work, because this is really important to make sure that everything is in good quality so that when you scan it, you edit it, it's easier to render. And not only that, even the whole idea of just purchasing materials, it's not cheap. And if you start off buying all these expensive tools, you basically don't earn yet because you have to pay off everything. So it's basically a lot of expenses involved and money involved. That's why I also told you that it's really important to consider the budget, because this sort of throws around the whole idea of the other factors, and they all affect each other that way. So before I end this video, I want to share some tips, last minute tips on how to price your work. First is to build a credible portfolio. Your portfolio is a very much visual way of how people perceive you. If you have a website, go and publish your portfolio work there. Make sure that everything is cohesive. You want to make sure also that when people see your portfolio, this is the type of work you want to make, and this is the type of work you want to attract clients in order for them to contact you in order to do this kind of work. Because I remember putting up all my portfolio work before and realizing that there are 3 to 5 projects that I don't do anymore, and it's important to just cut them out of the portfolio work, because this will be able to narrow down the type of service that you eventually want to provide to your client. My second tip is to prioritize your strengths always. Like I told you, I am really good with a lot of softwares, Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, but my top I would say I'm more of a Photoshop person than an Illustrator person. I can do Procreate. When I edit videos, I prefer Final Cut, even if I know how to do Premiere Pro. So make sure your strengths are always emphasized in this scene, because when a client asks you, oh, I want you to do a magazine for blah, 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 if you end up not succeeding in making your work good because you have to learn InDesign by scratch, that's gonna be hard for you. The bad thing that I don't want to happen to you is be like super stressed and like, oh, I don't know how to do this, I give up. You don't want to be in the middle of doing design work and suddenly just snap out of nowhere and just say, you know what, I'm just gonna quit this client, bye-bye. You can't do that. That's highly unprofessional. So make sure when you come in, you really have a good mindset about these things. Next is one of the most important things that I always tell clients and freelancers alike is to please make a contract. A contract is a binding agreement between two parties, and I list down every single thing that gets done in a contract. Whether it's hiring an assistant, working with a collaborator, and basically working for a client, doing books for a publisher, everything is based on contracts. So the basic info you have is like, this is an agreement between X person and X person, the list of deliverables, the deadlines, the turnover of cash or bank deposit or payment, the compensation, the non-disclosure agreement, because sometimes if you work on a project, let's say you work for a food brand, sometimes you can't work with its competitor for the next 2 years, so that one you have to lock it down. Also the copyright. Mostly when you do freelance, I realize that the clients actually buy the work and you don't own ownership to that work anymore, so that one you have to state it there. And also, it's really important to be transparent about every single thing in a contract, because this boils down to how the details work in. So for example, if you have a major revision or a minor revision, make sure to put that inside the contract in order to add up to your fees and in order to make sure that everything is covered. So next time when you get a misunderstanding with your client or your publisher, you tell them, but it's not in the contract. My last and final tip is to just be upfront with your rates. Honestly, it's the best thing that I've done for my career. I remember when I was starting out, like 2015, 2016, this was the first time that I published my book. So for the first year that I published my book, the rate was not really high, but also I understood where my publisher was coming from, because they're like, we don't know you, we don't know how this book is gonna perform, so we'll just give you like a good amount of money. But first it was like, can you make it higher? But then after that, the years after, since my first book became a bestseller, the rate started increasing, and I was like, they knew that I sort of gave them value. And that's how you build client rapport over time. Even when I work with freelance, my first few clients were just really low, not super low, but it was good enough for starters. But then knowing that in the long run you can actually increase as you go is a really good opportunity for you to realize that your value is worth more because of your skill, your experience, and the labor that you put in, because you're now smarter, you're more able to comprehend the type of work that is needed, you're more organized. I feel like my organization skills have really improved over time, because when you work with these projects, it's more of like project management basically. It's not just making art. That comes at the latter part, but all these technical stuff, dealing with the contracts, talking about technicals, deadlines, timelines, it's really, really necessary in order for you to sort of get a good workflow out of your freelance work and book work. So lastly, also I wanted to talk about the distinction between earning for freelance and books, just so you get a context. But basically the services are the same. The whole thing is just for freelance, you get an amount of money immediately, like X amount for freelance. For books, what happens to me is actually different for the two publishers that I've worked with. So I work with a Philippine publisher and an international publisher in the US. So for the Philippine publisher, I get X amount of money before I start working. So that's a fixed rate. It's like a salary. It's like, okay, we'll give you this money, get to work. And then once I sell a cap of books, like let's say once I sell 10,000 books, I get a royalty for every book sold. Eventually that royalty is what I get as passive income. So the more books I sell, the better money I get. So that's why I try to market my books as accessible and as frequent as possible in order for people to buy it, in order for me to be able to make more art. For the second type of book royalty system, so for my US publisher, and I think this applies to most US publishers, I don't get royalties immediately. They give me a fixed amount of money at the start as well. It's a larger amount of money compared to the Philippines, but what happens is I have to make sure I sell like a huge amount of books, not just 10,000, because it's international distribution. Once I reach that peak that would amount to the same amount that they gave me as the salary, that's when I start getting royalties. So that's quite a challenge. So again, this is like very, very different, and it's also important to note that, because if you're getting into books or if you're getting into freelance, all of these circumstances may change over time depending on the decisions of the client, and it's also important to be knowledgeable in all aspects. And in order for you to do that, you have to start now, do your research, talk to people about it, ask other people how they should price their work. Also, I want to add one more thing in terms of negotiation. My trick is, let's say I get a project, I will give this client a certain amount, like a high amount. And then if he or she doesn't like it, he will give a lower amount. So there's like this high amount from me and low amount from him or her. So what I do is I actually make something that meets in the middle, and then I tell them I won't go down. This is gonna be the compromising rate. So usually the compromising rate works, and I think that's the best way, because if you start setting yourself at a low rate, they'll think, oh, she's just not too expensive, then I could just give her this rate, and then it just goes down, and you just don't want that to happen. And you have to be smart with these things. In Filipino, it's called discarte. It really helps you sort of think, oh, okay, because I did this offer, it has to be this one. So I hope these tips really helped you get an insight on how to price your work. Pricing is really, really subjective to you, and I will let you decide how you want to price your work. But if you do have more questions about this topic, please leave a comment below, and we'd like to talk to you more about this information. Thank you again to Skillshare for partnering with me on this video. If you want to check out stuff on freelance, I will link some classes down below, but I highly recommend one from Peggy Dean, which talks about pricing for freelancers, because this topic is very, very common amongst the freelancer networks, because the type of work really depends on the value you give it. Also, since you're here, I'm giving you 2 months free access to Skillshare Premium, and make sure to click that link down below for the first 500 subscribers, because you will get access to over 25,000 amazing classes that will really help you improve your knowledge and be better, not just in freelancing, but making art, doing design work, writing, being an entrepreneur. So be sure to click that link down below and let me know which classes do you prefer the most. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe this video, and make sure to stay updated by clicking the bell for notifications on new videos and updates on my travel and art videos. And I will see you guys on my next video. Bye!